Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Elizabeth, and if this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button right now. It would mean the world to me. Today, I'm sharing a story that nearly destroyed my life at 82 years old. It's about trust, betrayal, and how sometimes the people closest to us can cause the deepest wounds. But before we dive in, I want to hear from you. Please tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world, and I promise to say hello to each and every one of you. Your support keeps me going, and I appreciate every single one of you more than you know. Now, settle in with your coffee or tea, because what I'm about to tell you will shock you to your core. Let me take you back to 2019. My name is Elizabeth Margaret Whitmore, and at 78 years old, I thought I had life figured out. My late husband Robert and I had raised 3 beautiful children, and I was living comfortably in our family home in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, the same house where we'd celebrated birthdays, graduations, and Christmas mornings for over 40 years. My youngest daughter, Sarah, had married a man named Marcus Thompson 5 years earlier. Marcus was everything you'd want in a son-in-law, at least on the surface. He was charming, well-dressed, drove a nice car, and always had a ready smile. He worked in what he called financial consulting, though I never quite understood what that meant. When he spoke about money and investments, he used big words that made him sound important and successful. Marcus had this way of making you feel special when he talked to you. He'd lean in close, make eye contact, and speak in this confident, reassuring tone. "Mom Whitmore," he'd say, "he always called me that. You don't need to worry about anything. I've got everything under control." Sarah seemed happy. They lived in a beautiful suburban home about 20 minutes from me, complete with a manicured lawn and 2 cars in the driveway. Marcus would often joke about how well he was taking care of his girls, meaning Sarah and, by extension, me. He'd pat Sarah's hand possessively and say things like, "My wife will never want for anything, and neither will her family." I should have paid attention to how Sarah seemed to shrink a little whenever he said things like that. The first red flag came during a family barbecue in the summer of 2019. I was struggling to open a jar of pickles, and Marcus swooped in to help. As he twisted the lid off with ease, he said, "Mom Whitmore, you really shouldn't be living alone in that big house anymore. At your age, accidents happen. What if you fell and no one found you for days?" The comment stung more than it should have. I was 78, not helpless. I still drove, cooked my own meals, maintained my garden, and lived independently. But Marcus had a way of planting seeds of doubt. Over the following months, he'd make similar comments. Always wrapped in concern, always delivered with that charming smile. "Mom Whitmore, your hands are shaking a little. Are you sure you should be handling those finances on your own? That's a lot of stairs in your house. One wrong step. I worry about you, especially since Dad passed. You shouldn't have to carry all these burdens alone." Slowly, gradually, these comments began to take root. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was getting too old to handle everything on my own. When you hear something often enough from someone you trust, you start to believe it. By late 2019, Marcus had positioned himself as the family's financial advisor. He'd helped Sarah consolidate some credit card debt, and he often bragged about his investment strategies and business connections. When he spoke about money, he radiated confidence and authority. One chilly October evening, Sarah and Marcus came over for dinner. I'd made Robert's favorite pot roast, the recipe I'd perfected over 30 years of marriage. As we sat around the dining room table, Marcus brought up a topic that would change my life forever. "Mom Whitmore," he said, cutting into his roast with deliberate precision, "Sarah and I have been talking, and we're concerned about your financial situation." I set down my fork, confused. "My financial situation? What do you mean?" Marcus exchanged a look with Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Well," he continued, "we know that Dad's pension stopped when he passed, and you're living on just Social Security now. That can't be easy." He was right, of course. Robert's death had cut our household income significantly. I was managing, but money was tighter than it had been in decades. Still, I was proud of my independence and didn't like discussing my finances with anyone. "I'm doing fine," I said, perhaps more defensively than I intended. Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest and caring. "Of course you are. You're strong and capable. But here's the thing, I've been looking at your situation, and I think I can help you build some financial security for your golden years." He pulled out a leather portfolio and opened it on the table, revealing charts, graphs, and official-looking documents. "I've been working with some high-net-worth clients on investment strategies that could triple your money in just 2 years. The returns are incredible." Sarah chimed in, her eyes bright with excitement. Mom, Marcus helped the Johnsons down the street turn their retirement savings into enough money to buy a vacation home in Florida. He's really good at this. Marcus nodded modestly. I don't like to brag, but I do have a track record. The thing is, these opportunities are usually only available to people with significant capital to invest. But because you're family, I can get you in on the ground floor. I studied the documents he'd spread across my dining table. They were full of financial jargon and impressive-looking numbers, but honestly, they might as well have been written in a foreign language. I don't understand half of what's on these papers, I admitted. That's exactly why you need someone you can trust to handle this for you, Marcus said smoothly. Look, here's what I'm proposing. You let me take over managing your finances, your bills, your investments, everything. I'll make sure everything gets paid on time, I'll invest your money in these high-return opportunities, and you can just relax and enjoy your retirement without worrying about paperwork and deadlines. It sounded almost too good to be true. But Marcus, I don't have much to invest. Just my Social Security and the small savings account Robert and I built up over the years. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Mom Whitmore, you're thinking too small. I'm not just talking about investing your current money. I can arrange lines of credit, business loans, investment loans, all kinds of financial instruments that will give you capital to work with. And the best part? I'll handle everything. You won't have to worry about a single detail. Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Mom, this could be your chance to really enjoy your retirement. Maybe take that trip to Ireland you and Dad always talked about. Maybe fix up the house the way you've always wanted. Marcus nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. And here's the beauty of my system. I'll even take care of all your regular bills. Your mortgage, utilities, credit cards, everything. I'll set up automatic payments from the investment accounts, so you'll never have to worry about due dates or late fees ever again. The offer was seductive. At 78, I was tired of managing paperwork, tired of worrying about making ends meet, tired of feeling like I was slowly falling behind. The idea of having someone competent and trustworthy take care of everything while my money grew in the background sounded like a dream come true. I don't know, I said hesitantly. It seems like such a big step. Marcus's expression grew serious. Mom Whitmore, can I be honest with you? Sarah and I worry about you. We worry that you're going to struggle financially, and we worry about what would happen if you had a medical emergency or needed assisted living someday. This isn't just about making money, it's about securing your future and giving you peace of mind. He paused, letting his words sink in. And frankly, it's about giving Sarah peace of mind too. She loves you so much, and she loses sleep worrying about whether you're okay. I looked at my daughter, and I could see the genuine concern in her eyes. Sarah had always been my most sensitive child, the one who worried about everyone else before herself. The thought that my financial situation was causing her stress made my heart ache. What exactly would I need to do? I asked quietly. Marcus smiled, and I could see relief in his expression. Just sign some paperwork to give me financial power of attorney, and I'll handle everything else. Within 6 months, you'll be amazed at the difference. Looking back now, I realized that what happened next was a masterclass in manipulation. Marcus didn't rush me into signing anything that night. Instead, he spent the next 3 weeks gradually building my confidence in his plan. He'd call every few days with updates about investment opportunities that were opening up. He'd mention clients who were making incredible returns. He'd share news articles about market trends that, according to him, supported his investment strategy. Each conversation made his offer seem more legitimate and more urgent. Mom Whitmore, he'd say, I hate to pressure you, but some of these opportunities won't be available much longer. The window is closing. Meanwhile, Sarah would visit more frequently, and she'd always find ways to work Marcus's proposal into our conversations. Mom, did you think any more about letting Marcus help with your finances? The Johnsons just bought that vacation home I mentioned. Mrs. Johnson told me they never would have been able to afford it without Marcus's help. The psychological pressure was subtle but constant. I began to feel like I was being foolish and stubborn for hesitating. Here was someone offering to help me secure my financial future, and I was dragging my feet out of pride or fear. Finally, in early November 2019, Marcus came over with a stack of official-looking documents. I've got everything ready, he announced, spreading the papers across my kitchen table. Once we get these signed, I can start working on building your wealth immediately. The paperwork was overwhelming. There were investment agreements, power of attorney forms, bank authorization documents, and what Marcus described as preliminary loan applications to establish credit lines for investment purposes. Each document was dense with legal language that I couldn't hope to understand. Marcus, I said, feeling overwhelmed, this is so much paperwork. I don't understand half of what these documents are saying. He sat down beside me, his manner patient and reassuring. Mom Whitmore, I know it looks complicated, but that's exactly why you need someone like me to handle this stuff. Think of me as your financial translator. You don't need to understand every detail. You just need to trust that I'm looking out for your best interests. He pointed to the first document. This one just gives me the authority to manage your investments and pay your bills from the investment accounts. This one establishes a line of credit that I can use for investment purposes. This one sets up automatic bill payment from your new investment fund. Each explanation sounded reasonable in isolation, but I was beginning to feel like I was signing my life away. What if something goes wrong? I asked. What if these investments don't work out? Marcus's expression grew serious. Mom Whitmore, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Any investment involves some risk. But I've been doing this for years, and I've never had a client lose money on the strategies I'm recommending for you. Plus, we're not talking about gambling with your money. We're talking about sophisticated investment vehicles that I understand inside and out. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. But here's the most important thing. I'm not just your financial advisor. I'm your family. I'm married to your daughter. My success is tied to your success. If something goes wrong with your finances, it affects Sarah directly. Do you think I would ever do anything that could hurt Sarah? The logic was compelling. Marcus wasn't some stranger trying to take advantage of me. He was my son-in-law, someone with a vested interest in my well-being. When I looked at it that way, my hesitation seemed almost insulting to him and to Sarah. Okay, I said finally. Let's do this. Marcus beamed. You're making the right decision, Mom Whitmore. In a year from now, you're going to look back on this moment as the day your life changed for the better. We spent the next 2 hours going through each document. Marcus would read sections aloud, explain what they meant in simple terms, and guide my hand to the signature lines. By the time we finished, I had signed my name to more than 20 different documents. There's just one more thing, Marcus said as we were wrapping up. For the investment strategy to work most efficiently, it would be helpful if some of the credit accounts were opened in your name rather than mine. It's a technical thing having to do with credit utilization and investment leverage, but basically, it will allow us to access better rates and higher credit limits. I was exhausted from all the paperwork and ready to trust his judgment completely. Whatever you think is best, I said. Marcus smiled and patted my hand. Perfect. I'll handle all the applications and paperwork. You won't have to do anything except enjoy watching your wealth grow. As he gathered up all the signed documents, I felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Relief that someone competent was finally going to take care of my finances, but anxiety about stepping into such unfamiliar territory. I pushed the anxiety down, reminding myself that Marcus was family and that Sarah trusted him completely. When will I start seeing results? I asked. Give me 60 days to get everything set up and invested properly, Marcus replied. By January, you should start seeing significant returns on your investment. That night, after Marcus and Sarah left, I sat in my living room feeling like I had just crossed a bridge I could never uncross. For better or worse, I had placed my financial future entirely in Marcus's hands. For the first few months of 2020, everything seemed to be working exactly as Marcus had promised. In January, he presented me with an official-looking investment statement showing that my portfolio had grown by 15% in just 2 months. The numbers were impressive, even if I didn't entirely understand how they'd been calculated. See, Mom Whitmore? Marcus said proudly, pointing to the bottom line. I told you this would work. At this rate, you'll double your money by the end of the year. True to his word, Marcus had taken over all of my bill payments. Every month, he'd provide me with a summary showing that my mortgage, utilities, credit card payments, and other expenses had all been paid on time. I no longer had to worry about due dates or late fees. For the first time in years, I felt financially secure. The relief was intoxicable. I no longer dreaded opening my mailbox to find bills. I no longer lay awake at night worrying about whether my money would last through my retirement. Marcus had transformed my financial anxiety into financial confidence, and I was grateful beyond words. In February, Marcus surprised me with what he called a performance bonus. He handed me an envelope containing $500 in cash. This is just a small advance on your investment profits, he explained. I wanted you to have some spending money to enjoy yourself. I was touched by the gesture. With that money, I treated Sarah to a nice dinner at her favorite restaurant and bought some spring flowers for my garden. It felt wonderful to be generous again, to not have to count every penny before making a purchase. Marcus began visiting more frequently, always with updates about my growing portfolio. He'd show me charts and graphs that demonstrated how well my investments were performing compared to traditional savings accounts or CDs. According to his reports, while most seniors were earning less than 1% interest on their savings, my money was growing at an annualized rate of over 30%. "You're going to be wealthy, Mom Whitmore," he'd say with genuine excitement. "Not just comfortable, wealthy. Sarah and I are so happy for you." The validation felt amazing. At 78, I had finally made a smart financial decision that would secure my future and maybe even leave something meaningful for my children and grandchildren. I began to fantasize about the trips I could take, the home improvements I could make, maybe even the college funds I could establish for my grandchildren. Marcus also began including me in what he called family financial planning meetings. Once a month, he, Sarah, and I would sit down at my kitchen table while Marcus presented updates on not just my investments, but on the family's overall financial picture. He'd show us charts demonstrating how well everyone was doing and how our combined wealth was growing. These meetings made me feel important and included. Instead of being the aging mother who needed financial help, I was now a contributor to the family's prosperity. Marcus would often ask for my input on investment decisions, though he'd usually end up explaining why his approach was better than whatever I suggested. Still, being consulted made me feel valued and respected. In March, Marcus announced that my portfolio had grown enough to qualify for even more exclusive investment opportunities. "I've got you on a waiting list for what's called a platinum tier investment fund," he explained. "It's only available to high net worth individuals, but your account balance now qualifies you for consideration." The idea that I was now considered a high net worth individual was thrilling. Me, Elizabeth Whitmore from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, rubbing shoulders with the wealthy elite. Marcus made it seem like I was joining an exclusive club of sophisticated investors. Around this time, Marcus also began handling some of my other financial affairs. He offered to help me organize my important documents, and I gratefully accepted. He took copies of everything: my social security card, my birth certificate, my insurance policies, even the deed to my house. "For safekeeping," he explained. "In case anything happens, everything will be properly organized and accessible." By April 2020, I was completely dependent on Marcus for all financial information. I no longer received bills directly. They all went to a P.O. box that Marcus had set up for security purposes. I no longer had to balance checkbooks or track expenses. Marcus provided me with monthly summaries that showed my growing wealth and confirmed that all my bills were current. I felt like I was living in a financial paradise. The stress that had dominated my life since Robert's death had completely disappeared. I was sleeping better, eating better, and enjoying my retirement in ways I never thought possible. Sarah seemed happier too. She'd often comment on how much more relaxed I seemed, how much more enjoyable our time together had become now that I wasn't constantly worried about money. "Marcus has been such a blessing for our family," she'd say. "I don't know what we would have done without him." If there were warning signs during this period, I was too grateful and too relieved to notice them. When Marcus mentioned that he'd had to open additional credit lines to take advantage of certain investment opportunities, I trusted his judgment completely. When he explained that some of the investment vehicles required personal guarantees, I signed whatever he put in front of me without question. After all, the results spoke for themselves. According to every statement Marcus showed me, I was getting richer every month. My trust in him wasn't just complete, it was rational, based on demonstrable success. I had no idea that I was living in a carefully constructed illusion that was about to come crashing down around me. The first sign that something might be wrong came in late May 2020. And it was so subtle that I almost missed it entirely. I had run into my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, while getting my mail. She was a sweet woman about my age who had always been friendly but not particularly close. As we chatted about the unusually cool spring weather, she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "Elizabeth, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay with your finances? I only ask because I got a call from someone claiming to be collecting on one of your accounts, and they had my number listed as a reference. I told them I didn't know anything about your financial situation, but it seemed odd." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of account?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. "They said it was a credit card account that was past due. I'm sure it's some kind of mistake or maybe even a scam call, but I thought you should know about it." I thanked her and walked back to my house on shaking legs. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was indeed a scam call. Or maybe there had been some kind of mix-up with the automatic bill payment system Marcus had set up. I called Marcus immediately. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and cheerful as always. "Mom Whitmore, how are you doing on this beautiful day?" "Marcus, I need to ask you about something." Mrs. Patterson said she got a call from someone claiming I had a past-due credit card bill. "Is there some kind of problem with the bill payment system?" There was a pause, just a brief hesitation, but long enough for me to notice. "Oh, that," Marcus said with a laugh. "I know exactly what that's about. There was a technical glitch with one of the credit card company's automated systems last week. They sent out a bunch of incorrect past due notices before they realized their mistake. I've been dealing with their customer service department all week getting it straightened out." His explanation sounded plausible, and his tone was so confident and reassuring that I felt my anxiety begin to fade. "So there's nothing wrong?" I asked. "Absolutely nothing wrong," Marcus confirmed. "In fact, your account with that particular company is not only current, but it's showing a credit balance because of some rewards points that got converted to cash back. I should have mentioned it to you before, but I didn't want to bother you with technical details about a computer glitch." I felt foolish for worrying. "I'm sorry for bothering you with this, Marcus. I should have known you had everything under control." "Mom Whitmore, please don't apologize. You have every right to ask questions about your finances. I'm just glad we could clear this up quickly." After I hung up, I felt better but not completely settled. Something about the phone call nagged at me, though I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Maybe it was the pause before Marcus answered, or maybe it was the overly detailed explanation for what should have been a simple computer error. Over the next few weeks, I found myself paying more attention to things I had previously ignored. When Marcus visited with my monthly financial summary, I asked more questions about specific line items. When he mentioned new investment opportunities, I asked for more details about how they worked. Marcus handled my increased curiosity with patience and what seemed like complete transparency. He had answers for everything, and his answers always sounded reasonable. But I noticed that his explanations were getting longer and more complex, as if he was working harder to convince me. In June, another small incident occurred that deepened my unease. I received a piece of mail addressed to me from a bank I didn't recognize, First National Investment Bank. The envelope was marked "Important Account Information," and it had been torn open and then resealed with tape. When I called Marcus to ask about it, his explanation was immediate and smooth. "Oh, that's from the investment bank that handles one of your portfolio accounts. I opened it because it was marked as time sensitive, and I wanted to make sure there wasn't anything that needed immediate attention. It was just a routine account statement. I was going to include it in your next monthly summary. Can I see it?" I asked. "Of course," Marcus said. "I'll bring it over tonight along with some other documents I've been organizing for you." But when Marcus came over that evening, he didn't bring the bank statement. When I reminded him about it, he apologized and said he'd left it in his car. "I'll bring it next time," he promised. "It's really nothing interesting, just a bunch of legal language about account terms and conditions." These incidents were small, and Marcus always had reasonable explanations. But they began to accumulate in my mind like drops of water that would eventually overflow a bucket. I found myself lying awake at night, trying to remember details about the paperwork I had signed months earlier, trying to understand why I was getting mail from banks I didn't remember opening accounts with. The worst part was that I felt guilty for having these doubts. Marcus had transformed my financial life in ways I could never have imagined. According to his reports, my net worth had increased by over 400% in just 6 months. I was financially secure for the first time since Robert's death, and it was all thanks to Marcus's expertise and generosity. What kind of ungrateful person doubts someone who has done so much for them? What kind of paranoid old woman creates problems where none exist? I tried to push these thoughts away and focus on the positive results, but the doubt, once planted, continued to grow like a weed in my mind. The beginning of the end came on a hot July afternoon in 2020. I had decided to surprise Sarah by stopping by her house with some fresh tomatoes from my garden. When I pulled into her driveway, I noticed that Marcus's car wasn't there, which was unusual for a weekday afternoon when he should have been working from his home office. Sarah seemed genuinely surprised and pleased to see me, but there was something in her expression that I couldn't quite identify. She looked tired, stressed, maybe even a little frightened. We sat on her back patio drinking iced tea and catching up, but I could tell her mind was elsewhere. "Sarah, honey, is everything okay? You seem distracted today." She hesitated for a long moment, staring into her glass of tea. "Mom, can I ask you something about your arrangement with Marcus?" My heart began to beat faster. "What about it?" "Well, it's just, some of the bills that used to come to our house have been forwarded to your address lately. Credit card bills, loan statements, that kind of thing." When I asked Marcus about it, he said it was part of the investment strategy, but I didn't really understand his explanation. The ground seemed to shift beneath me. "What kind of bills?" Sarah got up and went into the house, returning a few minutes later with a handful of envelopes. "These came to our house by mistake," she said, handing them to me. "They're all addressed to you, but at our address. Marcus usually intercepts the mail, but he was out of town last week, so I saw them." With trembling hands, I opened the first envelope. It was a credit card statement from Capital One for an account I had never opened. The balance was $23,847.69, and it was marked as 90 days past due. The second envelope contained a similar statement from Chase Bank showing a balance of $31,203.58, also seriously past due. As I opened envelope after envelope, a picture of financial catastrophe emerged. There were credit card accounts, personal loan accounts, and lines of credit, all in my name, all with enormous balances, and all showing as delinquent or in default. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice barely audible, "did you know about these accounts?" She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "Mom, I swear I didn't know. Marcus handles all the financial stuff in our house too. He told me that your investments were doing great, that you were making more money than you'd ever dreamed of." I felt like I was falling through space. Everything I had believed about my financial situation for the past 8 months was apparently a lie. Instead of becoming wealthy, I had apparently gone deeply into debt. Instead of having my bills paid automatically, I was apparently defaulting on accounts I didn't even know I had. "Where is Marcus now?" I asked. "He said he had to go out of town for a client meeting. He's been traveling a lot lately for work." Sarah paused, and then added quietly, "Mom, I've been wondering if maybe his business isn't going as well as he's been telling us. We've been having some money problems of our own, but Marcus keeps saying it's just temporary cash flow issues." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together, and the picture they formed was terrifying. I spent the next hour with Sarah, going through every piece of mail and trying to understand the scope of the disaster. By the time I left her house, we had identified at least 15 different accounts in my name with a combined balance of over $180,000. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I kept thinking about all the documents I had signed, all the times Marcus had explained that credit accounts needed to be opened in my name for technical reasons related to the investment strategy. I had trusted him completely, and he had apparently used that trust to systematically destroy my financial life. When I got home, I immediately called Marcus. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later, and again the call went to voicemail. By evening, I was frantic with worry and rage. I called Sarah. "Have you heard from Marcus?" "No," she said, and I could hear the fear in her voice. "Mom, I tried calling his office, and the number has been disconnected. I don't think he's been going to work for weeks." That night was the longest of my life. I sat at my kitchen table with all the bills spread out in front of me, trying to understand how my life had gone so wrong so quickly. Every account showed the same pattern, an initial period of regular payments followed by months of non-payment. The dates aligned perfectly with Marcus's timeline. He had apparently made payments for a few months to establish the accounts and build my trust, and then had stopped paying altogether while continuing to show me fake investment statements. The worst part was realizing how completely I had been manipulated. Every document I had signed, every explanation Marcus had given, every reassurance about my growing wealth, it had all been part of an elaborate fraud designed to use my name and credit to obtain money that I would ultimately be responsible for repaying. At 79 years old, I was facing financial ruin, and the person responsible was someone I had trusted as a son. Marcus finally returned my calls 3 days later. When I heard his voice on the phone, I felt a surge of rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. "Mom, Whitmore. Sorry I missed your calls. I was in back-to-back meetings with clients all week. How are you doing?" His casual tone, as if nothing had happened, made me want to scream. "Marcus, we need to talk. Right now. In person." There was a pause. "Of course. Is everything okay? You sound upset. Come to my house. Now." An hour later, Marcus was sitting in my living room, his usual confident demeanor intact but something wary in his eyes. I had spent the time waiting for him organizing every piece of evidence I had, all the bills, all the statements, all the collection notices that had been arriving at Sarah's house. "Marcus," I began, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands, "I want you to explain to me why I'm receiving bills for credit card accounts that I never opened." His expression didn't change. "Mom, Whitmore, I thought we discussed this. Some of the investment vehicles require personal guarantees and credit backing. It's all part of the strategy we agreed on." "Stop," I said sharply. "Stop lying to me. I have bills here showing that these accounts haven't been paid in months. I have collection notices threatening legal action. Where is all the money you've been borrowing in my name?" For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus looked genuinely uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair and ran his hand through his hair. "Okay, I can see why you might be confused. The truth is, we've hit a temporary rough patch with some of the investments. Market conditions have been challenging, and some deals that should have closed months ago are still pending. What deals? What investments? I want to see documentation of every penny you've invested on my behalf. Marcus's confidence began to crack. Mom Whitmore, I understand you're concerned, but you need to trust me on this. Some of these investments are confidential. I can't just hand over sensitive financial documents to anyone, even family. Anyone? The word came out as a shout. I'm not anyone, Marcus. This is my money. These are my debts. I have a right to see everything. Look, Marcus said, his tone becoming defensive, investing involves risk. I explained that to you from the beginning. Sometimes you have temporary setbacks before you see the big gains. If you'll just give me a few more months, I can turn this whole situation around. I stared at him, and suddenly I could see him clearly for the first time. The charm, the confidence, the reassuring explanations, they were all tools he used to manipulate people. The Marcus I had trusted and admired didn't exist. He was just a man who had seen an opportunity to exploit an elderly woman's trust and had taken it without hesitation. Where is my money, Marcus? He stood up abruptly. I don't like your tone, Mom Whitmore. I've been trying to help you, and you're treating me like some kind of criminal. Answer the question. Where is my money? Marcus paced to the window and stared out at my garden. When he turned back to face me, his expression had hardened. Fine. You want the truth? Some of the investments didn't work out the way I expected. I made some mistakes. But I was trying to get you the highest possible returns, and sometimes that means taking bigger risk. How much is gone? It's not gone. It's just temporarily tied up in illiquid assets. How much, Marcus? He was quiet for a long time. Most of it, he finally admitted. But I can get it back. I have some deals in the pipeline that will more than cover everything. I felt like he had punched me in the stomach. Most of it? Marcus, according to these bills, you've borrowed almost $200,000 in my name. Where did that money go? His composure completely cracked. Look, I had some business expenses that I had to cover temporarily. Some of my clients defaulted on fees they owed me, and I had to use some of your investment capital to keep my business afloat. It was supposed to be temporary. Business expenses? I could barely speak through my rage. You used my money for your business expenses? I was going to pay it back. Marcus's voice was rising now, becoming desperate. Everything I did was to try to build wealth for you and Sarah. Yes, I made some mistakes, but my intentions were good. Your intentions? I stood up, my whole body shaking with fury. Marcus, you have destroyed my life. I'm 79 years old, and you've put me nearly $200,000 in debt. I'll never be able to pay this back. I'll lose my house, my car, everything Robert and I worked for over 40 years. Marcus's expression cycled through several emotions: guilt, defiance, desperation, and finally, cold calculation. Mom Whitmore, I understand you're upset, but you need to think about this rationally. If you report this to the authorities or try to fight the debts, it's going to hurt Sarah too. This will destroy our marriage. Is that what you want? To break up your daughter's family? The threat was clear, and it hit me like a physical blow. He was using my love for Sarah as a weapon against me. Are you threatening me? I'm not threatening anyone. I'm just pointing out the reality of the situation. Sarah doesn't know the full extent of what's happened, and if this all comes out publicly, it's going to devastate her. She'll never forgive herself for introducing me to you. She'll blame herself for your financial problems. I stared at this man who had systematically betrayed my trust, stolen my money, destroyed my financial security, and was now threatening my relationship with my daughter. At that moment, I realized that the charming, helpful son-in-law had been a complete fabrication. The real Marcus was a predator who had targeted me because I was vulnerable and trusting. Get out of my house, I said quietly. Mom Whitmore, please. Let's work together to fix this. I know I can. Get out of my house now, or I'm calling the police. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating whether to continue trying to manipulate me or to cut his losses. Finally, he shrugged. Fine. But think about what I said about Sarah. If you destroy me, you're going to destroy her too. After he left, I collapsed into my chair and cried harder than I had since Robert's funeral. But these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of rage, humiliation, and fear. At nearly 80 years old, I was facing financial ruin because I had trusted the wrong person. The weeks following my confrontation with Marcus were the darkest of my life. The reality of my situation became clearer with each passing day, and it was worse than I had initially realized. I spent hours on the phone with credit card companies, banks, and collection agencies, trying to understand the full scope of the damage. Marcus had been busy. In addition to the obvious credit cards and personal loans, He had also opened business lines of credit in my name, taken out a home equity loan against my house, and even applied for several payday loans. The total damage was staggering, $247,000 in debt across 19 different accounts. The monthly minimum payments alone would have been more than twice my Social Security income, even if I could have qualified for minimum payment plans. Most of the accounts were already in default, with late fees and penalty interest rates compounding the balances daily. The collection calls started almost immediately. My phone would ring 20 or 30 times a day with automated collection messages and aggressive debt collectors. They would call at all hours, early in the morning, late at night, during meals. Some of them were professional, but others were hostile and threatening. One particularly awful call came from a collector who refused to believe that I hadn't personally used the credit cards in question. "Ma'am, these charges show purchases at electronic stores, luxury retailers, and cash advances. Are you telling me you didn't make any of these purchases?" "I'm telling you exactly that," I replied, my voice shaking with exhaustion and frustration. "I never even saw these credit cards. Someone else used my personal information to open these accounts without my knowledge." "Ma'am, that's a very serious accusation. If what you're saying is true, you need to file a police report for identity theft." "It wasn't identity theft by a stranger," I explained. "It was someone I trusted who had access to my personal information." The collector's tone became skeptical. "So you gave someone else access to your Social Security number and other personal information, and now you're surprised that they used it?" "Ma'am, that makes you responsible for the debt, not a victim of identity theft." Conversations like this became routine. The legal system seemed designed to protect creditors, not elderly victims of financial fraud. Because I had signed papers giving Marcus financial power of attorney, and because he had used my real personal information, rather than stealing my identity, most of the debts were legally my responsibility regardless of whether I had personally benefited from the borrowed money. My relationship with Sarah became strained during this period. At first, she was supportive and equally outraged at Marcus's behavior. She moved out of their house and came to stay with me while she figured out what to do about her marriage. But as the weeks passed and the full extent of the financial damage became clear, I could see Sarah struggling with conflicting emotions. She was angry at Marcus, but she was also scared about her future. They had been married for 5 years, and she had built her life around him. The revelation that he was a liar and a thief meant that everything she thought she knew about her life was false. "Mom," she said one evening as we sat in my living room surrounded by piles of bills and legal documents, "what are we going to do?" I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, kind, trusting daughter who had never hurt anyone in her life, and I realized that Marcus had been right about one thing. This situation was going to hurt her badly, regardless of how we handled it. "I don't know, sweetheart. I honestly don't know." The legal options were limited and expensive. I consulted with 3 different attorneys, and they all told me essentially the same thing. Because I had voluntarily signed papers giving Marcus financial authority, and because he was my son-in-law rather than a stranger, proving criminal fraud would be difficult. A civil lawsuit might be possible, but Marcus would need to have assets worth recovering, and given his financial situation, that seemed unlikely. The attorney's fees for pursuing legal action would be tens of thousands of dollars with no guarantee of success or recovery. At my age, with my limited income, spending money I didn't have to chase money I'd probably never see seemed like throwing good money after bad. Meanwhile, the debt collectors became more aggressive. I received several notices threatening legal action, and 2 different collection agencies threatened to place liens on my house. The stress was affecting my health. I was losing weight, having trouble sleeping, and developing anxiety symptoms that made it difficult to function normally. One morning in early September, I woke up and realized that I had to make a choice. I could continue fighting a battle I couldn't win, or I could try to find a way to move forward with my life despite the financial destruction Marcus had caused. I chose to move forward, but the path ahead seemed almost impossible to navigate. The turning point came when I met Patricia Chen, a credit counselor at the local community center who specialized in helping seniors deal with financial crises. Patricia was about my age, sharp as a tack, and had dealt with dozens of cases similar to mine. "Elizabeth," she said after reviewing my situation, "what happened to you is more common than you might think. Financial exploitation of elderly people is epidemic, and it's often perpetrated by family members or people the victim trusts." Patricia helped me understand my options more clearly than any of the attorneys had. While criminal prosecution might be difficult, there were other ways to address the situation that didn't require expensive legal battles. First, she helped me file detailed fraud complaints with every creditor, explaining the circumstances under which the accounts had been opened and used. While this didn't automatically absolve me of responsibility for the debts, it did trigger internal investigations by the credit card companies and banks. Some of these investigations yielded surprising results. 3 of the credit card companies concluded that their account approval processes had been inadequate, given that Marcus had opened multiple high-limit accounts in my name within a short time period without proper income verification. They agreed to reduce or eliminate the balances on those accounts. 2 of the personal loans were found to have been obtained using forged documents. Marcus had apparently created fake bank statements and employment verification documents to qualify for loans that I never would have been eligible for based on my actual income. Those loans were also reduced significantly. Patricia also helped me understand the debt validation process. Many of the collection agencies pursuing me couldn't actually provide documentation proving that I owed the debts they were trying to collect. When challenged to provide complete account histories and signed agreements, several agencies simply stopped pursuing the debts rather than going through the legal process of validation. More importantly, Patricia helped me find my voice and my strength. For months, I had been allowing myself to be victimized by Marcus and then re-victimized by the debt collection system. Under Patricia's guidance, I learned to stand up for myself and demand that I be treated with respect and dignity. The first time I successfully challenged an abusive debt collector, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. "Sir," I said to a particularly nasty collector who had been calling me names and making threats, "I am 79 years old, I am the victim of financial fraud, and I will not allow you to speak to me disrespectfully. If you cannot conduct this conversation in a professional manner, I will hang up and report your behavior to the Federal Trade Commission." The collector's tone changed immediately. "Ma'am, I apologize. Let me transfer you to a supervisor who can discuss payment options with you." Patricia also connected me with a support group for seniors who had been victims of financial exploitation. Meeting other people who had experienced similar betrayals helped me realize that I wasn't stupid or naive. I had been targeted by someone who was skilled at manipulation and who had exploited my trust and my desire to provide financial security for my family. The support group became a lifeline for me during the darkest period of this ordeal. There was Margaret, whose grandson had stolen her life savings. There was Robert, whose financial advisor had invested his retirement money in non-existent opportunities. There was Helen, whose caregiver had systematically looted her accounts over the course of 2 years. All of us had been chosen as targets because we were trusting, because we wanted to believe that people who claimed to care about us actually did care about us. None of us had been stupid. We had been victimized by people who were expert at exploiting trust. Through the support group, I learned practical strategies for dealing with debt collectors, creditors, and the emotional trauma of financial exploitation. I also learned that recovery was possible, even at my age, even with the extent of damage I had suffered. Most importantly, I learned that I wasn't alone and that what had happened to me wasn't my fault. By October 2020, I had managed to reduce my total debt from $247,000 to approximately $89,000. It was still an overwhelming amount for someone in my financial situation, but it was manageable enough that I could begin to see a path forward. Sarah had filed for divorce from Marcus and was slowly rebuilding her life. The process was painful for both of us, but we were supporting each other through it. Our relationship was actually stronger than it had been in years, built on honesty and mutual support rather than on the false security that Marcus had provided. Marcus had disappeared entirely. Sarah's divorce attorney had been unable to locate him to serve him with papers, and none of his former business associates knew where he was. It was as if he had vanished as soon as his scheme unraveled. Part of me hoped he was somewhere feeling guilty about the damage he had caused. But mostly, I just hoped he was far away from anyone else he could hurt. As I sit here today, 2 years after my life was turned upside down, I want to share the lessons I learned from this experience. Not because I want pity, but because I want to help prevent what happened to me from happening to someone else. The first and most important lesson is this: it can happen to anyone. I wasn't a confused, helpless elderly woman. I had managed my own finances successfully for decades. I had raised 3 children, helped run a family business, and navigated the complex process of caring for my husband during his final illness. I was educated, experienced, and careful with money. But Marcus targeted me precisely because I was competent and trustworthy. He knew that if he could gain my confidence, would be a valuable victim. He exploited my strengths, my trust in family, my desire to provide security for my loved ones, my respect for people who seemed knowledgeable about finance, and turned them into weaknesses. The second lesson is about the power of incremental manipulation. Marcus didn't ask me to sign over $200,000 on our first meeting. He built my trust gradually, with small successes and reasonable explanations for each step in the process. By the time I was signing documents that put me at serious financial risk, I trusted him so completely that I didn't even read what I was signing. If someone had told me in 2019 that I would sign documents I didn't understand, giving someone else control over my finances, I would have insisted that I would never be so foolish. But manipulation works by making each individual step seem reasonable and safe. The third lesson is about the importance of maintaining some independence, even in close family relationships. I should have insisted on receiving my own bills, keeping my own copies of important documents, and maintaining direct relationships with my financial institutions. When someone takes over all aspects of your financial life, even with good intentions, you lose the ability to spot problems before they become disasters. The fourth lesson is about the power of shame and secrecy in enabling financial exploitation. Marcus counted on my reluctance to admit I had made a mistake, my desire to avoid looking foolish, and my fear of hurting Sarah. These emotions kept me isolated and prevented me from seeking help until it was almost too late. When something seems wrong, it probably is wrong. Trust your instincts and ask questions. Don't let anyone make you feel stupid for wanting to understand your own financial situation. The fifth lesson is about the resilience of the human spirit. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I believed that Marcus had destroyed not just my financial security, but my ability to trust people, my relationship with my daughter, and my sense of myself as a competent person. But I was wrong. With help from people like Patricia and the support group, I was able to rebuild my life in ways I hadn't thought possible. I'm not financially wealthy, but I'm financially stable. I live modestly but comfortably. I have a deep appreciation for simple pleasures that I had taken for granted before this experience. Most importantly, I've discovered a purpose I never knew I had. I now volunteer with Patricia's credit counseling program, helping other seniors who have been victims of financial exploitation. I speak at community centers and senior centers about the warning signs of financial fraud. I've helped dozens of people navigate the process of recovering from financial abuse. Sarah and I have a closer relationship now than we ever had when Marcus was in our lives. We talk honestly about money, about relationships, about the challenges of aging and the importance of maintaining independence while still accepting help when we need it. I've even started dating again, something I never thought I would do after Robert's death. His name is Frank, he's 82, and he's a retired teacher who volunteers at the library. We go to movies together, work in our gardens, and talk about everything under the sun. He's kind, honest, and has never once offered to manage my finances. The final lesson is this: recovery is possible, even from devastating betrayal, even at my age. It requires help from others, it requires courage to face difficult truths, and it requires the willingness to start over when starting over seems impossible. But it can be done. I am living proof that it can be done. If you're watching this video because something similar has happened to you, or because you're worried about a situation involving someone you love, please know that you're not alone and that help is available. Contact your local area agency on aging, which can connect you with resources specifically designed to help seniors deal with financial exploitation. Contact the National Center on Elder Abuse, which maintains a database of services and support organizations in every state. Contact your state's Attorney General's office, which may have special units dedicated to investigating financial crimes against elderly people. Most importantly, don't let shame or embarrassment prevent you from seeking help. What happened to you is not your fault, and you deserve support and assistance in recovering from it. If you're watching this video because you want to protect yourself or someone you love from financial exploitation, here are the warning signs to watch for. Someone offers to simplify your financial life by taking over all your bills and accounts. Someone pressures you to sign documents quickly without giving you time to read and understand them. Someone discourages you from discussing financial decisions with other family members or advisors. Someone receives your mail or asks you to change your address for convenience. Someone opens new accounts in your name for investment or business purposes. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate further. Maintain some independent control over your finances, even if you need help managing them. Keep copies of all important documents. Stay connected with family and friends who can help you spot problems. Remember, the people who commit financial fraud against elderly people are often charming, professional, and seem completely trustworthy. They target people who are intelligent and successful because those people have assets worth stealing. Being victimized doesn't make you stupid, it makes you human. Before I end this video, I want to say something to anyone who might be watching this and thinking about taking advantage of an elderly person's trust. Don't do it. The damage you cause extends far beyond money. You destroy people's sense of security, their ability to trust, their relationships with their families. You steal not just their assets, but their dignity and their peace of mind. The harm you cause lasts long after the money is gone. And to everyone else, thank you for watching, thank you for listening to my story, and thank you for being part of a community that looks out for each other. If this video helped you or someone you know, please share it. The more we talk openly about these issues, the harder it becomes for predators to find and exploit victims. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Your support means everything to me and helps me continue sharing stories that matter. I love hearing from viewers from all around the world, so please tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I promise to respond to as many of you as I can. Remember, you're stronger than you think, help is available when you need it, and it's never too late to start over. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.